jump into my time machine and take a ride with me back to the 1980s, where all the guys had flock of seagulls haircuts and all the girls wore neon leg warmers. And we were going to be focusing on this charming but adorable coin geek who, back in the late 1980s, was just a average college student. And in one of his English classes, he was asked to write an article about something that was modern, something that used technology, but something that was controversial. And being the coin geek that he was, he didn't write about the fall of the Soviet Union or the Berlin Wall. He didn't write about global pollution. He chose to write about a new development in the world of numismatics, and that development was there were organizations that would take a coin of yours and for a small fee offer their opinion of what the grade was. And the idea was that you would be able to sell this coin a lot easier to a buyer who may be halfway around the country or even halfway around the world who had never seen the coin in person and never met you in person, because of course this was back before there was such a thing as the internet. But this organization's grade would be trusted by both the buyer and the seller. This was the advent of third-party grading. This coin geek got an A on that paper, by the way. If you are new to the channel, my name is White Cross. I want to thank you for being with me here today. This is World of Coin Collecting Volume 5, the history of third-party grading. If you are one of my returning subscribers, what can I say but thank you guys, as always, for being with me here today as we go deeper into coins and physical precious metals. If you're not a subscriber yet, I'd like to invite you to become part of this community. Go ahead and click on that subscription button. The World of Coin Collecting, history of third-party grading. Third-party grading is a development that happened in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and I think it really was a sea change. It was an earth-shattering change in our hobby. One of the most important changes in the hobby in the last 50 years, arguably the most significant change in our history in the last 100 years, with maybe the exception of one of the other topics that we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. If you are new to the channel, I like to begin each of my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of financial advice, simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years, really with coins closer to 50 years, and it's getting closer every day. I also like to begin each of my videos with a couple of concepts that we can kind of fold back into the subject that we're talking about. And again, the subject that we're talking about here is third-party graders. So let's start with the definition of what a third-party grader is. Third-party graders are simply experts who offer authentication. That's an important part of this puzzle. Authentication, but also a grade on your collectible. It doesn't have to be coins. The industry of third-party grading has branched out significantly in recent years to include collectible cards, including game cards and sports cards, also comic books, sports memorabilia. Lots of different areas of the hobbies of collecting things are now graded by third-party graders. So these are experts who offer authentication and also a grade on your collectible for a fee, and they are impartial. And impartial is an important concept here. And the next concept we want to talk about is disinterest, and that's kind of goes hand in hand with impartiality. These people that are supposed to be grading your collectibles, and again, we're going to focus on coins here, are supposed to be disinterested. Legally speaking, that means that they are not influenced by considerations or personal advantage. So there's no conflict of interest. These people are supposed to be impartial and disinterested. They're not going to buy your coins from you. They're not going to sell your coins. They don't buy and sell memorabilia or cards or whatever else it is that we're talking about. Their service is designed specifically to give you a third-party grade, a disinterested and an impartial grade on your collectible. Disinterest, item number 2 that we're going to think about and work back into a little bit later. And then finally, since we're talking about third-party graders, we couldn't do this without talking about what you see here before you. And these specialized holders are called in our industry slabs. And that's the third concept we're going to talk about before we really get into the meat of the subject of this video. A slab is simply the rigid case or holder that the third-party grader puts the coin or collectible into. This is a third-party grader called Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. This is an example of one of their rigid holders. You can see it's a rigid holder, plastic holder. It's got some anti-counterfeiting devices, some anti-tampering devices. It's designed to protect the coin. It is inert, which means it won't react with the coin. And it's also tamper evident and tamper resistance. It would be difficult to break into one of these pieces. You can do it, and it's actually done all the time. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But the idea is that these have the coin sonically sealed into them, and that's a novel thing that had never really been done before in the history of collectibles, and we'll definitely talk about that a little bit later. So, disinterest, third-party grading, and slab. Some concepts to keep in mind as we get further into this video. This is video number 5 from the World of Coin Collecting series, The History of Third-Party Grading. We will be releasing kind of a follow-up in the World of Coin Collecting. That's volume 6, and that's going to be third-party graders today. So this video is going to talk about kind of the history and how third-party grading came about. The next video, volume 6, will talk about how third-party graders fit into a modern coin collection. And just as an aside, we will be releasing yet another video on these that is not part of the World of Coin Collecting series. Well, we'll talk about a little bit more of an advanced topic, and that is the collectability of some of these slabs. Some of these organizations went out of business 30 or 40 years ago. Some of these organizations are still very much in business, but as time progresses, their slabs, their holders, have gotten more and more intricate. Sometimes they have improved plastics that are being used. They have improved tampering devices that have been added to it. All sorts of things that are kind of changing. And that creates what we call generations of slabs. And the older slabs have become much more collectible to a segment of the numismatic community. So that will be a different video entirely, not part of the World of Coin Collecting series, but keep an eye out for it. It'll be an interesting video if you like the subject matter. So let's talk a little bit about the need for third-party grading, and then we'll switch into the history of third-party grading, and we'll just take a little bit of a glimpse into the future of third-party grading as we get ready for Volume 6 in the World of Coin Collecting series. The history, the need of third-party grading really came about right after World War II. This is when American workers started to have a little bit more disposable income, and the coin collecting field kind of exploded. This was something that people thought would be fun to do in their now recreational time that we really hadn't had before, with some disposable dollars that we could commit to a hobby like coin collecting. So as more and more people entered into this hobby, you had, unfortunately, more and more people who were entering the hobby for nefarious reasons. Bad guys throughout history have always tried to look at a system and find a way that they can tap into that system and exploit that system for their own gain. And that was really starting to rear its head in the field of coin collecting during this period of time. As an example, the 1914 D cent, that's a Lincoln cent, and it was minted in Denver, a very rare coin. This was one that was highly collectible and very valuable. They didn't make very many of them, and there are very few survivors of them to this day, the 1914 D cent. So what did enterprising people do? They took advantage of the technology of the time. We had improved microscopes, we had improved rotary devices that could smooth surfaces of coins to give them appearance of a higher grade. They can kind of wipe away some of the bag marks or contact marks that coins seem to get over time. You can see some of them here right in front of Liberty's face there. With some new technology, you could almost kind of give Liberty a facelift, and that was an artificial way of improving the quality of the coin. But let's go back to the 1914 D cent. Enterprising people, bad guys, were taking 1944 D, Denver Lincoln cents, of which there was an abundance, and using microscopic tools would shave off part of that first 4 in 1944 to turn it into a 1. And that made it really easily a 1914 D cent. they had altered the surface of the coin. And that's just one example. And I'll show a picture here so you can see what it is I'm talking about. This became more and more prevalent as more and more people entered the hobby. The prices of coins go up. The bad guys start looking for ways to exploit the system. And this is just an example of what was now possible with the technology that we had. So coin collectors realized that something needed to be done about this, or the hobby would suffer in ways that we couldn't even imagine, and eventually it may even kill the hobby. And about that time, some of the experts in the field came up with the idea of authenticating pieces. Now, individual dealers had done this all along. If you wanted to buy a nice coin, you went to the person who specialized in those coins because they had the most experience in looking at the quality and condition of these coins. They also had the experience in trying to detect these pieces that had been altered or were completely counterfeit head to toe. But we started to come up with some experts who offered an opinion that they didn't own the coin. It wasn't one of their pieces. You could send the coin to them or meet them at a particular location if there was a coin show, and they would write up a description of this. The first person to really do this, controversial figure in coin collecting, one of the most important figures in early 20th century or kind of mid 20th century coin collecting, this was a man named Walter Breen. And Walter Breen has since been found to be pretty a nasty character with a pretty bad reputation. But outside of coin collecting, what he did in coin collecting was, as an expert, he offered his opinion. So you could give a coin to him. He wrote up a special letterhead from an organization that he headed called the Institute for Numismatic Authenticators. And I'll show a picture of one of these. And it was simply letterhead where he would write a description of your coin and offer an opinion as to grade. It wasn't one of his pieces, it was one of your pieces. And he would offer an opinion of its grade for you, ideally that you would keep with the coin when it came time to sell it. You could offer it to the buyer as evidence that an expert in the field had seen your piece and written a definition of what his considerations were, what he thought of the coin. And newly on the scene was also the Sheldon scale of coin grading. We've talked about Dr. Sheldon's scale quite a few times. In fact, in the last video of this series, Coin Grade and Coin Grading, Coin Grades and Coin Gradings, that would be volume 4 of the World of Coin Collecting series, we kind of introduced the idea of Dr. Sheldon's scale. He was originally an attributor, a collector of early American copper coins, and he applied a scale of condition from 1 being really, really poor, and then whatever that 1 was valued at, multiples of values were different train stops on this continuum between 1 and 70. 1 being the poorest, 70 being the almost theoretically best condition possible. And there were increments along the way where he stopped that train ride, so those individual stops got grades. There was an EF grade of 40 to 45. There was an about uncirculated grade of 50 to 58. Go back and look at that video if you haven't watched it. We go into detail with it. The Sheldon scale, again, was originally devised for copper cents, but in about the 1970s, the American Numismatic Association decided to apply the 1 to 70 scale, the Sheldon scale, to every American coin, and it's since been adopted for coins around the world. It's not the only system that's used, but it's probably the most prevalent, the Sheldon scale of 1 to 70. So you had the advent, the beginning, of third-party graders, disinterested parties who would offer their opinion as to the grade. And you had a scale of 1 to 70 that had been applied to coins from every other series of coins that are out there by the American Numismatic Association. So you had the beginnings, the foundation of how this would probably work. The problem with a scale or with a system like Walter Breen's system is pretty obvious when you think about it. This is a handwritten note, and it's on letterhead that he wasn't too careful with. So it's possible that at one point or another, people who had submitted a very nice coin to him had simply taken the note that he'd written back, put that coin aside, and replaced it with a worse quality coin. As there was no image of the coin included in this system, and there was no way of locking that coin to that note that he had written, physically there was no connection to it. So again, those bad guys exploiting the holes in this system, and that was one of the most obvious holes. Obviously, that system didn't work very well, and Breen eventually stopped doing it. but it was still probably the foundation of what we would see as third-party graders. And an important aside, it's important to note that a third-party grader is different than a slab. So just because he didn't use a rigid plastic holder doesn't mean it was a third-party grader. And likewise, kind of an opposite side of that coin, if you will, just because somebody is using a rigid holder doesn't mean it's a third-party grader. It's really the combination of those two things that come together, as we're about to see, that really kind of shook the coin industry, and is still, ripples are still being felt to this day. So ANACS, American Numismatic Association, started a certification service. They actually called it ANACS, ANACS, and that was the American Numismatic Association certification service. This would have happened in the mid to late 1970s. And the idea was that they would, for a fee, take a look at your coin. Experts in that particular series would offer their opinion as to grade, and they would take a photograph of a certification, of a certificate that included the description of the coin and additional information, but also the photo of the coin itself. Now, they were taking advantage of the improving technology in things like photography and the ability to transfer these images to printable surfaces. And for the most part, it worked. It was really kind of what I see as the beginnings of third-party gradings, just because you could verify. Now, I said before that this was an example of a Morgan dollar that's been slabbed. You can see the very distinctive bag marks on her face. There are distinctive bag marks all over this coin. And with a photograph of high enough resolution, you could match up those things. In fact, it became something that we did as coin collectors. When we got a photo cert, we double checked, we triple checked, we quadruple checked. We could see that there was a little smudge here, a little dye break there. There were little indicators that told us that the coin in the photograph was the coin that we were holding that was associated with that ANACS photo certificate. And it worked pretty well. But there's always other ways that it can be affected, and it might not be along the same lines as those bad guys exploiting the system. But what if you were a dealer who had one of these photo certs, and they came in kind of a plastic envelope, and the coin was fitted inside the envelope? It was often in just a regular 2x2, and the coin kind of went along with the photo cert. But what if after the coin was graded, you're a dealer with slippery fingers, with butterfingers, and you drop that coin on the floor and it gets a couple scratches, or it gets a really bad rim ding? That happened today, and it might have been certified a year or two ago. So you've got a value of a coin that's based on the coin that used to be rather than the coin that is now. There were other little bits and pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite work. And this was kind of a proto-slab, a prototype version of what we expect to see to this day. But you can see that there were flaws in this system. They hadn't quite perfected it. Moving a little bit further in history, to the early 1980s, there was a dealer named Alan Hager. He's still a dealer with us today. And he created the idea of using that photo cert, except sealing it along with the coin in a rigid plastic case. The concept is really kind of earth-shattering when you think about it. Having a collectible that you couldn't touch, you couldn't feel it. Even as the owner of that piece, it was out of reach. It was sealed inside of a clear plastic case. And the photo cert that Mr. Hager used in his company, that was called TruGrade, and I'll show a picture of an TruGrade photo slab here. The photograph actually went inside the slab. So the coin was tied to the photo certificate. The grade was part of this entire package. I've got an example of a system that was very similar. This is an INS certified coin, but you can see the photograph is inside the rigid case along with the coin, and there's information about the coin that's listed here as well, so you can have additional information if you want. The coin you can verify very easily. The bag marks and all the different specific characteristics of this silver dollar are in fact this silver dollar. As an aside, in that upcoming video when we talk about the collectability of these slabs, I will definitely be talking about this INS slab. It's one of a series that I have. Stay tuned for that if you're interested in these. So Mr. Hager set up this system, and his system was pretty effective. I think it is definitely one of the most significant advances in the world of third-party grading. His system took the idea of the photo cert and made it so that you couldn't lose the coin, you couldn't drop the coin. It wasn't independent of the photo cert. It was all one unit, and it worked pretty well. His system worked pretty well. The problem is that some people didn't agree with his grades. And when you're talking about grades of coins, it's very important to understand that, especially when it gets to be a very expensive coin, the difference between 1 point on that Sheldon scale that we talked about can be vast. A coin that is worth $50,000 as an MS63 may be worth $300,000 as an MS64 or 65. So you see that 1 or 2 points on that grading scale can be very significant in terms of grade. And while the industry had adopted the Sheldon scale of 1 to 70, there were no rules about which version you used. What your opinion was, you could say as a coin dealer or a coin collector, I think this is an MS65. And that's your opinion. That subjectivity kind of made its way into the Sheldon scale. It sounds scientific. It sounded like we had made an advancement, but really, it came down to one dealer's word over another. If they felt it was a 63, they would label it a 63. There was very little independence for some of these early slabbers, and that's a very important distinction we're going to talk about. That disinterest was not there. So what happened? Well, there were groups of dealers who decided that they wanted to see this system progress to the point where these coins could be traded sight unseen to people all over the world. And they recognized that you needed a rigid plastic case with a disinterested third-party grader with experts in the field of grading who had vast experience in grading coins and whose opinion would be respected and appreciated and trusted by both the buyer and the seller of the coin. So one of the first groups that kind of set this in motion was a group of dealers and investors backed by a man named David Hall. David Hall, another very important person in the world of numismatics, still an important dealer to this day. David Hall and his group of investors and coin dealers got together and developed a company that they called the Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS. And this happened in about 1985. And it was very well received. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because some people say that PCGS was first, really. Some people say that TruGrade was first. Some people say that NGC was first. NGC, another group of prominent dealers, led really by a man named John Albanese. And we've talked about John before, and we're actually going to talk about him a little bit later. John Albanese launched this company called Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, NGC. That happened about 1987. So you can see how close these are chronologically. They're all lumped right together. NGC and PCGS immediately took off, and their grades were considered conservative, believable, and trustworthy. So that became kind of the standard for how third-party graders really progressed in the late 1980s. The problem is that, again, the bad guys find a way to exploit a system. And they did just that. They knew that if some people were seeing slabs by NGC that graded a coin as a 64, or PCGS that graded this coin as 61 on that Sheldon scale of 1 to 70, what's to stop them from putting a coin in a holder and calling it a 66, or a 68, or a 69? And people who weren't familiar with these services might assume that all of them are created equal. But they're not. They really aren't created equal. Some of them are not as disinterested as others. Some of them were simply dealers who got their hands on these slabs one way or another, had them created or bought them wholesale, and then began to assign the grades that they felt the coin was. The problem was that the market was starting to see the grades that NGC and PCGS put forth as kind of the standard. That was acceptable. So if you had a small white slab like this one, that's an NGC slab, but you decided that you wanted to put into a coin, you wanted to make your own slabs, you could assign any grade that you wanted to, and somebody who didn't really understand the difference might feel that they had the same value, not financially, but in terms of grade. One organization 66 must be another organization 66. But that's not really the way it works. That was that exploitation of this flaw in the system. So this began kind of a Wild West period of time in coin collecting and third-party grading, when anybody who wanted to could start a slabbing company and start assigning grades. Remember, there were no laws that specified what a 1 was, what a 70 was, what a 63 was. Anybody who wanted to could assign any grade they wanted to, and nobody could really say anything about it. They simply just said, let the market decide. So that's what you see here, a selection of slabs, some of them from these respected third-party graders, some of them from organizations not so well respected. So this was all kind of a Wild West period of time. And note that a lot of these slabs look very, very similar. Isn't that an odd coincidence? How peculiar is it that this slab and this slab both have a clear outside area with the label up at the top, and they have a little certification number on the back and a little barcode on the back, and they both have a white surface that's encapsulating the coin. You can see how similar these are and how somebody may just assume that they are of equal value, equal weight, equal trustworthiness. So NGC and PCGS's slabs started to be kind of what most people copied. And interestingly, and again, just a little bit of a weird coincidence, a lot of these certification services started using letters that were the same as NGC or PCGS, or very slight derivations thereof. So if you're looking at a PCGS holder or an or this holder by a company called PCS, it's not PCGS, it's PCS. So again, that similarity just became a little bit suspicious, and it seems like that's what happened. Everybody was copying everybody else's slab, and they were trying to come up with a name that sounded like the higher opinion coin companies, the PCGSs and the NGCs of the world. This Wild West period. And this Wild West period continued on until probably about the 1990s. But like I said, a lot of these people had conflicts of interest. The grades that they were assigning were sometimes to help their own inventory. A dealer could get a hold of these slabs and assign coins from his own inventory, the highest grades possible, in an effort to get the highest prices possible. And then we start to see developments that start to bring about the changes that this all was put in place for in the first place, and that is selling coins sight unseen to people around the world and around the country. The internet was starting to develop to the point where this became a reality. So maybe those early pioneers in the world of third-party grading saw the writing on the wall and knew that this was going to happen. And nowadays, we have easy access to these pieces from all sorts of dealers, but also from venues like Great Collections and even eBay, where you can buy these pieces. But a lot of these venues that sell these pieces, and a lot of the more respectable, trustworthy dealers, don't deal in a lot of these early Wild West third-party graders anymore. They only accept coins for sale that come from very specific vendors, your PCGS, your NGC, your ANA. This is kind of the later version of the ANA's certification service. This is an early ANACS slab. And those people whose grades didn't live up to the expectations of professionals and experts in the field are no longer allowed to be sold on these venues. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the next video, where we talk about how third-party graders fit into a modern coin collection in Volume 6 of the World of Coin Collecting Third-Party Graders Today. So, third-party graders, a little bit of a brief history so you can see some examples of what these third-party graders' slabs look like, understanding why the need was there. There was an increase in counterfeit pieces or altered pieces. Remember that 1944 to 1914 delinquent. What was the industry going to do about it? Impartial third-party grading allowed people to have a little bit more confidence that the piece that they owned in their collection was authentic and correctly graded, and that allowed the hobby to continue forward to where it is today. Third-party grading, a history, World of Coin Collecting Volume 5. If you have any questions about these third-party graders or the coins that are contained within, by all means, leave a comment down below. I'd like to get your comments and hear what you have to say about this. If you have any questions about the process of third-party gradings, if there's any aspects of it that you're unsure of, leave a comment down below and I'll try to address it if I can. If you have suggestions for any other videos in the World of Coin Collecting series that you'd like to see, or any other area of coin collecting or precious metals that you'd like to see, leave a comment down below and I'll take a look and see if I've got the examples and the knowledge base so that we can answer your question and make a video about it. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.